Welcome to the July 6 OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the agenda just so we know who's been attending the calls. And then to kick things off today, Lan, you have a lightning talk?
Yes. I'm going to talk about how to rerun tests with different JVM options. Let's start. Okay for me to share my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So today's talk, I'm gonna basically talk about in a scenario where I'm a developer, I want to rerun the test with different JVM options, and what should I do? Before I get into detail, I want to talk about what is the variations that we run. So this is a playlist. I'm going to use JDK Math as example here. So as you can see that we have different variations here. And then in the test run, you will see JDK Math and score 0, that's corresponding to the first variation. And then JDK Math and score 1, that's the second variation, and JDK Math and score 2, that's the third one, so on and so forth. So if you have more variations, that will just continue. And if you don't have the variations, then that means we're just running default. There's no options in this case. So quickly go to, this is just our sanity.js OpenJDK nightly run. And you can see here, we actually print out the variations. And then we, in the JVM options here, we actually explicitly write out what the mode 105 is. Basically, that's the actual values that we run for the test. Okay. Another way you can look at this, of course, is you'll go to modes.xml, that's in TKG repo. You can look at what mode 105 is. That will actually tells you the options as well. So you can look at this file without running test if you don't know certain modes. Okay, so get back to the topic today. I want to rerun the test. I have a defect assigned to me. I need to rerun the test with different JVM options. There are two parameters we can use in Grindr. One is extra options, which means that we append additional JVM options to the test. And then the one is JVM options parameter in Grindr, which basically replace the original JVM options. I have two Grindr that I ran before. The first one, just to show what parameters I set here. In the extra options, I just basically saying, run xint, basically is append. So if you look at the console output here, JDK Math, basically this will append -xint at the end. So another example is I'm using JVM options. So in that case, I want to, instead of append, I'm like, okay, I just want to run the options that I replace everything, just use xint. And in this case, if you go to see the console outputs, again, is JDK Math and score 0. So basically in output, we try to tell the user, okay, this is the default one, but instead the real value that we're actually running is xint. So this is replace. So we also have a wiki for Grindr. If you follow the link, should I have it opened? This is a wiki that's in Aqua test repo. It does have descriptions for other parameters as well, but today we're focused on extra options and JVM options. So in most cases that you can just put in the JVM options in extra options and JVM options parameter. It really depends on the underlying framework. So if you're running system tests, then special characters needs to be escaped. This is especially for some complex JIT options. The special characters needs to be escaped. So there's two examples here. So just to recap here, if you want to rerun with different options, your friend will be extra options parameters and JVM options parameter in Grinder. And if you're running special JIT options, you can go back to the wiki page and looking at how we escape for system test. If you have any other special case that were not captured here in the example, please let us know. And that's it for today's lightning talk. Any questions?
Thanks, Lan. That was really clear. Shelley?
I was just going to say, and the additional note is if you can't remember which means append and which is replace, there are small writing under the parameter field that'll tell you.
Yes, that's right. So looking at Grinder here, just quickly show we do have writings here try to tell you this is append and then JVM options is replace here. Yeah, the descriptions, it's a little bit small, but I do find it's useful. Okay, so I guess, well, as always, if you guys have any questions, you can reach us at Slack channel, then we can talk more details. I will stop sharing. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Lan. We'll the agenda back up and we'll continue on. All right. So just take a quick look at the recent end user issues to make sure that they're getting the attention they should be. This one came in a week ago and doesn't seem to have had a response yet. Is there someone who can take a look at this? Looks like we're throwing different exceptions than what hotspot is.
Yeah, I'll get that assigned out.
All right, thanks, Toby. I'll just tag you in it. Is there anything else in this list that we should be discussing now? All right, then we will jump back to the agenda. Quick look at the download trends. Take a look at the OpenJ9 trends, nice little uptick. And we see that that is a bit of an uptick in 8 and 11. And a fairly big uptick comparatively for us for 16, which is interesting. Does anybody know what would be driving the extra interest in 16? Then any other comments or questions around the download trends? Jump back to the agenda. We have the 0.27 release coming up. So during the last call, we talked about the M2 builds being tagged, and the builds started internally at IBM. Have those builds completed, and are they shareable?
Is Adam on?
Pete, are you on the call?
I was trying to figure out if Adam's on. No, we haven't done the builds yet. There was a problem. We put something in like about Wednesday last week and missed a change, and so we couldn't build on the weekend, and there is nobody around to fix it. So it's fixed now, so the builds could run anytime. Just one note that we aren't building what we tagged for M2. We're just going to build the latest. Doesn't make any sense to build something older and test it.
In the release branch, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm questioning why we tag for M1 and M2. Might be better just to build something at the time we're ready to do the build at the M1 and M2 points, but just build the latest content. Possibly tag afterwards what we've built.
Yeah, historically we've done those tags because Adopt has been doing the milestone builds for us. But if that won't be a possibility going forward, then tagging after the fact may be okay.
It's a possibility, but I mean, I guess if we are going to tag and then build was going to happen right away, that would make sense. But if we tag and then more changes come in, I don't see the benefit in building something older. It'd be better to build the latest and test the latest.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it really depends on whether we can get, as you said, whether we can get those builds launched right away and whether we can make those builds public.
So I thought we could make the builds public now, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm on board with the approach of either tagging and building immediately or producing a build, tagging after. The only thing is if we do that, the Java version output won't be correct.
Well, it won't show the tag. It will show the SHA that we built.
Yeah.
And we can manipulate the version strings, like the version string, or one of the pieces of information in the system property which could show M2. Which I'd have to double check. I think it might show up in the minus version output.
Okay. When we look at the milestone plan for this, there are still 6 open items in here. The OpenSSL update is always a late change just to make sure that we haven't missed a security update there. Are the other items here something that are likely to be fixed, or should they be moved out at this point?
I'm thinking at this point they need to be moved out. Doesn't seem there's any progress being made on the JIT problems. It would have to be pretty low risk to get in at this point. I wanted to ask about the AGCT unit testing. I know we're missing some code in the extensions repo for Java 8, but I was wondering if that testing could be enabled in Java 11 and beyond. It's a question for Shelley.
If the code is there and those targets exist in 11 and beyond, then yeah. For some reason, I thought that target, those hotspot serviceability targets were only for 8, but I'll have to click on that link above in the comment above Toby's that happens on Merchant.
So the source works differently for 8 and 11 and beyond. So we are missing some files in 8, and Jason was going to look at how we could get those files.
Yeah, if you click on the March 23rd hotspot serviceability target there, Dan, that'll take us to. So what I need to find is if this hotspot serviceability target exists in 11 and up. That's the question.
This link is for the head stream.
This is for head. Okay, so it does. Yeah, so then sure. 11 plus, we can put the playlist target to be 11 plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I can help on this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a very quick update to a
Yeah.
playlist.
Yeah.
And the one other one, there's a RMI SSL. I wanted to try to do some more triage on that, so I was leaving it there. So it would help me get around to doing that.
Okay. Just to
Not
be
that we
clear,
could
we're not expecting a change.
I'm not
coming in
expecting
this
any
month.
fix, but I'd like to do some triage and see if I could assign a component to it.
Sense. I'll leave it in your hands then to follow up with the JIT team on moving out the other items.
Yeah, they'll be moved out eventually, unless there's some very low risk fix that shows up soon.
All right, so that's 027. And I'll just ask, are we still on track then for the July 20th GA?
Well, we'll start on July 20th. We have to wait until the afternoon to pick up the changes to the extensions, and then we have to see if they build and if they're going to introduce any problems. And then hopefully we're ready to do the internal builds. But since we haven't done any publishing of anything so far, I'm expecting delays. So I'm thinking we may not be finished that week, and it might spill into the next week.
Okay.
But we'll see how it goes with them too. Maybe we can update that status in the coming weeks.
Okay. Then for 028, just a reminder that our code split date is coming up in about a month.
Right, so there's a bigger discussion there about OpenJDK method handles. There's no point in doing a code split if we're not even going to be shipping Java 17 anytime soon. So.
Right, so that does bring us to the bigger question of the OpenJDK method handles and what the current state of that work is. Can we get an update on that?
Yes. Can you hear me then?
Yep.
So right now I am working on the Sanity OpenJDK bug issues that we have been tracking. Right now, all of Sanity and extended functional testing have been passing for both JDK 16 and 17. The only issues currently we are remaining seeing that are related to method handle is with Sanity OpenJDK. So I think there's 5 remaining Sanity OpenJDK for Java 16 and 7 for Java 17. I have a work in progress that will be fixing up one of the issues related to invoke dynamic referencing the var handle polymorphic methods. So that should fix, I think, one for 16 and one for 17. The other one, some of them are intermittent issues that I did not have time to really address exactly what is triggering that one. And the other, I think there's 2 other ones that I'm working on getting it resolved. I'm just working on a fix that will handle the special cases in the code path. In terms of functional completeness, I think that's all we have remaining. The JCK sanity testing have been passing for the Java invoke branch. And our biggest concern right now, I guess, would be the performance regressions that we're seeing. From last week's talk with JIT team, I believe we're still on the issue that we're not fully using JIT compile code, and we're spending, I think, quite a bit of time, like over 50% time in the interpreter. I believe Nazim is mentioning that he have been working on an issue to inline and compile the link to virtual calls, which he believes should be the majority of the regression, but we cannot confirm at the moment yet, as the tests and performance runs have not come back with any number yet.
So when you say we're spending 50% of the time in the interpreter, during the last few calls we talked about that as, I think the number was a 20x
Yes.
regression.
Yeah.
Does that affect things that are, heavy users of invoke dynamic and method handles, or are we seeing that kind of regression even on simple Lambda test cases?
The 20x regression we're talking about is from the perf testing on Nash-Lorentz method handle related tests, which are basically just keep on running method handle. We haven't had time to run any regular benchmarks that are more of a user case rather than heavy method handle runtimes. I believe the JIT schedule was to resolve the big regression on method handle related tests first, and by the time they were able to at least inline or compile most of the stuff, they'll start running more of like a Liberty benchmark or a WebSphere benchmark to see how our actual like user workload performance stand at.
Okay, so there's been no running of the Bumble bench, micro benches, or anything like that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I think that's an important thing to get a handle on, is what kind of regression are we looking at in terms of Lambda expressions and general use of Lambdas, because that will dominate the kind of code that most users are running out of the box.
Okay. Yeah. I will mention that to the JIT team and ask them to do a performance analysis on that.
So if we're looking at a month's worth of time between the tentative code split date and today, and given this being the summer and a lot of people will be taking time off, or at least typically take time off, do we have a plan, and do we have enough people assigned to this that we think we'll be able to close out these issues?
I will be working, or at least except for Summer Friday, I'll be working mostly in the summer. So I think the Sanity OpenJDK issues can be all resolved before the code split. In terms of the JIT performance, I would have to talk with Daryl and Nazim about their schedule.
I think last time I spoke to them, they said they were going to add someone to help out with the performance investigation. So they're prioritizing the method handle work for the time being.
Okay, because I'm looking at this August 8 split date, and even the GA date of the 14th, of September 14th. That doesn't give us a huge amount of time to address a 20x regression. So I'm just getting a little concerned about whether we're going to be able to ship 17 on time. Given the magnitude of the... Sorry, go ahead, Toby.
I think at the moment, the problem we have is there's not enough data to accurately understand what impact the average user is going to see. The focus has been on the workloads that make heavy use of method handles because that's going to make it easy to identify where the problems are. Once we get more data on, the more conventional workloads, we'll have to determine, based on the numbers we see, if it's something that's acceptable or not. And I think that's going to determine when we release JDK 17.
Yeah, so we need conventional workloads, but we also need Lambda Heavy. And the reason I call out the difference there is our conventional workloads of Liberties and day traders and the like probably are not good examples of heavy usage of Lambda. So we may need some of those micro benchmarks to really be able to assess the impacts of some of these things.
Do you think that? Go ahead.
And I'd like to make sure we get both of those numbers as early as possible.
So do you think that the Nashorn test that we're currently running will not accurately reflect the performance of Lambda Heavy workloads?
Nashorn is a stress test case for invoked dynamics. It makes heavy use of invoked dynamic and method handles and updating of call sites in ways that lambdas do not. Right? A lambda expression typically compiles to an invoked dynamic with a single call site, and that call site is not changed by the application afterwards. I don't know if it actually compiles to a constant call site or if it just compiles to a mutable call site and never mutates the site. Whereas Nashorn in particular will mutate the site as it finds new types while running the application. So Nashorn makes heavy use of mutable call site, and as the types change or as it sees different types at a particular call site, it will generate new code for each of those sites. So you end up with code that mutates call sites in ways that Lambda does not. That will be harder for the JIT to handle. So as a stress test and a heavy usage, it's a great use case. But just as Liberty isn't very indicative of standard Lambda and stream expression, and stream use cases, Nashorn isn't either. So we need that middle ground.
Do you think at this point it would be worth focusing on the Lambda heavy workloads as opposed to Nashorn, given the time frame we're in?
I think we need both.
Okay.
The problem is a 20x regression is hard to ship. Right? So that has to be taken down. But having an understanding of how much of that 20x is jumping through mutable call site and how much of it is just general Lambda overhead or general invoked dynamic overhead will certainly help clarify things. So this would be a good time to sit down with the JIT developers if possible and see what kind of timeline you can hammer out on these and what other resources or people you can pull in to help with either performance testing or to help with the investigations, because this is a pretty big hill to climb.
Yeah, we'll be having more discussions with the JIT team this week. We'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Toby. think we'll move on given where we're at in terms of time. Shelley, is there an update on the adopt status?
Nothing much to speak of here. There's a community call tomorrow, which I think should be linked. The calendar's linked here. That Milestone 1 first release, which is the April re-release under Temarin banner. We're still waiting on a couple items from Eclipse Infra to close off the TCK testing. Other than that, we've done as much as we can with what we have available. So if they close on those couple of items, we're hoping that first release can close maybe by the end of this week. And then it's right on to the July release, which I think I've linked to the project in the Adoptium repo there, but it needs to get populated with some additional stuff. Noting that the focus will be on the primary platforms first, and then a second pass through the secondary platforms based on what we have machines for attached to the Temarin compliance TCK Jenkins server. That's probably it.
Shelley? Adam, is there an update on infrastructure? Actually, I don't see Adam on the call, so I guess we'll skip over this. Devin, do you have an update on the CMake migration?
Yeah, so the enabled by default is now merged into the JDK 11 extensions. I'm just porting that over to our ZOS specific branch, just to fast track, waiting on it to get auto merged in there. And that's about it for that. Then it was still picking away at the risk v stuff.
Thanks, Devin. I don't see Marius on the call either, so skip the JIT server and microJIT updates. Toby, is there anything you wanted to say on Snapshot Restore?
Yeah, so we had the first set of APIs go in last week. There's going to be some more enhancements required because the Liberty team needs access to more options, as running in a Docker environment requires different properties being set. So I'll be working on enhancing that set of APIs. There's also kind of a usability issue of the way it's done. If libcryo is not available on the machine, the VM just fails to start. So I'm going to be refactoring some of that stuff. So we'll do a dynamic load of the library, so we can start the JVM and print out a nice exception if the library is not available, rather than just failing to start. Still looking at addressing some of the issues with timers and some of the other fix-ups that we'll need regarding locales and local date time. And yeah, that's about it.
Toby? Cheng, is there an update on the foreign linker API?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of a code change on phase 4, I'm still currently working on the AX. There's still a little bit of work on there with a couple of finicky cases with the double structure to figure out why it fails. In terms of code change on phase 1, I think Toby is running Jenkins tests so far to make sure everything's okay, given OpenJIT container is already enabled. Once it's done, I'll just put everything together on the code change on 2 and 3 to double check with all the latest changes to make sure everything's okay before the submit to code review. I think it's x86 library is already merged this morning, so I think it should be good to go. That's everything from my side.
Thanks, Cheng. Pete, is there an update on the spell checking tool?
Yeah, I didn't do anything last week. It was a short week last week. So I'm thinking I should be able to take a look this week and get it merged. See how it goes. If it causes problems, we'll just we'll revert it.
All right. Sounds good. And I guess the next one of these calls is in a week on July 13th. Given that we're over time by a little bit, we'll call it here. Thank you, everybody, for the call, and we'll chat next week.
We didn't really talk about leaving OpenJDK method handles enabled for Java 16. Are you okay with leaving it enabled for Java 16?
I'm slightly concerned about the impacts on being able to do performance comparisons. It will be a surprise to anybody trying to do a comparison even down the line to see if the 16 build, how that compares with something else.
So people know that it's been enabled. We could unenable it if we needed to and do a JDK 16 build of the headstream without it, if we needed a build for that purpose. But it lets us run regular nightly testing with OpenJDK method handles enabled, as we did last night, and we can see there's some intermittent issues. And then we'll get the regular perf testing with OpenJDK method handles enabled as well, so we can see what it looks like for the regular benchmarks and how that improves over time. Otherwise, normally we'd just be turning off Java 16 builds because we don't need them anymore in the headstream, other than to help us out with the OpenJDK method handle work.
For that reason, it makes sense to keep it enabled for 16. I think we don't want it enabled for 17 until we've addressed some of these performance concerns and we have that timeline in place.
Yeah, so for 17, it's a different story. There's a lot more failures than I expected to see when we did the test with it enabled. So I think we could wait for that one.
All right, so I think the conclusion here is we'll keep it enabled for 16. We'll make sure people are aware that it's enabled only for the post-release builds that we would normally have turned off. The benefits of that are the increased testing and the ability to get that easy performance testing on it. And we still will hold off the decision on 17 until we get an update on the performance.
Yeah, and the failures as well. Sounds good.
All right, thanks.